Sarah, the dust has settled at Croke Park. Let's get it out of the way. Galway have ground it out.
I'm actually incredibly disappointed. I really thought this Cork team was going to do this today. But Galway were here last December, they were here in June. They obviously had a lot of hurt bottled, and it showed when Cork got the goal. The best team after that was Galway. They outscored Cork 1-4-1.
That was the thing really, wasn't it? It felt like when Cork got that goal, the first time in the lead, huge roars. It was a vocal Cork crowd, as it always is. And you felt like, I think I'd even said to you a couple of minutes before, and Cork tide is turning. But they weren't able to convert it. Galway dug in and I suppose held out.
Yeah, and look, I suppose what you're looking for your team at that point is your midfield to start winning primary possession. And I felt Aisling Thompson was out of the game just at that point after the goal. Chloe Sigerson, we didn't see her after that great point in the first half. There was probably too many players absent for Cork. Orla Cronin, despite the week, despite all the pressure, was outstanding for Cork today, but it just wasn't enough. I think Galway were full value for that win, and Aoife Donoghue, I know, got player of the match for RTE. She was everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. I suppose shout out to Hannah Looney for Cork, who did an incredible job, and that block for a potential Galway goal that could have seen Galway over the line much earlier. But their resilience late on, so positive. And Orla McGrath had been quiet to the last 10 minutes and then pops up with these two outrageous late points.
And I suppose if we rewind it back and look at the team selection, it was a hugely dramatic week off the pitch in terms of the suspensions, DRA, appeals. We didn't know until late last night. That surely, at the same time, I know the Cork management team will say, no, we're totally professional, but it still has to have a bit of an impact, surely, on the team with that uncertainty.
It had an impact on the team, but not on Orla. I suppose, she was the one with the most pressure on her shoulders coming into it. I was disappointed that Linda Collins was dropped for Orla today. I thought there was room for both of them on the team, and that was obvious when Linda came on as captain. She got down to business. She got Katrina Mackey through for that great goal. She was on everything in that 20 minutes that was positive for Cork. And I just think maybe Paddy missed a beat, because if he had played both Orla and Linda, they could have been further ahead earlier on.
First half as well, it felt like Galway pretty much scored. I think that they almost did score every opportunity, but they were far more clinical. They probably not hung in the game, but were a bit more, maybe streetwise is the word.
They were efficient, but I did feel like Cork were on far more possession. They were much better in the ruck. They were clean. They were very clean in the way they were moving through the game. So it was disappointing for Cork to go in at half time 1 point down, but that was down again to the player of the match, Aoife Donoghue. She got that outrageous point from under the stand. Those are clutch moments, and Galway had those clutch moments today. Cork didn't have enough of those clutch moments today.
I think another thing we touched on at half time was the puck out situation. In fact, both sides almost were quite wasteful. Indicative really at what times was not scrappy, but it was so physical. The referee let a lot go in terms of, I suppose, the spectacle, if you want to call it that. Every ball was so hard. It felt like at times there should have been more frees given. We were wincing at times up here in the press box. But the puck outs kind of situation probably, again, reflective of that kind of scrappy nature of the game.
There was very few balls won cleanly. I think Cork only won 4 clean balls, Galway 2. There was a lot of balls being won on the break. But fundamentally, you're looking for your, say, full forward line, half forward line to win possession. But because the Galway backs in particular were so physical, played so on the edge, Cork didn't necessarily get the frees that in other games that would be nailed on, and that would have obviously brought them much closer. Amy O'Connor took a lot of punishment inside there from Shauna Healy. Shauna Healy did her job. It's the referee's job to obviously, discipline players when she feels they're being too hard or going in too late or, are too physical. And she was letting a lot of it go. So I wonder, will Amy come off the field feeling a little aggrieved that she didn't have any protection?
You certainly had to earn for every ball out there at times, wasn't it?
Yeah, and look, it was going both sides. And as you said, we were wincing, but it did make for a spectacle. But sometimes it's important to recognise that you can't allow the backs to have free rein, because the forwards were working so hard. You have to give them recognition where it's due. If they win the ball and they try to carry the ball and they're getting fouled, you have to give a free.
Yeah, at times it meant, as you said, kind of set it up one way, and I'm not sure, did that suit Galway a little bit more than Cork perhaps?
I think it did. I suppose what we saw at the start of the second half was Galway setting up with 3 inside and then vast amount of space in front of them. The Galway forwards love that space. Siobhan McGrath loves the space. Ailish O'Reilly loves the space. Orla McGrath evidently loves the space. The Cork backs hate that space. And it just seemed like it was a little bit more congested up at the other end. Sarah Dervin, Shauna Healy, Siobhan Gardner, Emma Hellebert, they were all buzzing around the Cork players. There was very little space. And crucially for me, Cork, instead of breaking the tackle, were trying to hand pass the ball over players' heads, and there was some incredible interceptions. Dervla Higgins had 2. There was just key moments when you went, this is the last pass, it should be through, tried to play it over a player's head, and Galway were just coming through, interception, batting the ball through, coming away with the ball. And I suppose that's the most deflating thing from a Cork point of view, is that they were looking that they were going to be on for a score. Score didn't materialise.
I suppose to follow on from that then as well, there was a couple of, I suppose we call them goal scoring opportunities, where you were like one moment away from, oh, that's for through. I can count in my head 3 or 4 come to mind straight away. Again, those small little margins of where the dice rolls.
Well, when the referee is allowing the game to go, that's when you take those opportunities and you run the ball into the next tackle, because she was clearly allowing the players with momentum to carry the ball through. If it was me and I knew the referee was being that loose, I'd take that extra step. I'd go past the player. I'd either win a free, or I would have given the ball cleanly to the next player through. I wouldn't have been giving up the ball so easily with the player between me and the goal.
I become too firm or too kind of over the top in the fact that maybe Galway read the game conditions slightly better?
I think so. And look, as I said, Cork haven't been back here since 2018. You know, yes, they were here for the semi-final, but not being here last December, not being here in June for the league final, Galway had some really, really clever passages of play today. They didn't panic. They knew how they were going to grind it out. And I suppose playing Kilkenny, the champions, in both games, and those games going to the wire, that was the difference between Cork and Galway today. Cork haven't had that experience in the championship, and that's why late on today Cork didn't necessarily have any answers when Galway started asking big questions of them.
Because that was the thing really, once the Cork goal came, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, you felt like the tide was swinging, but it was Galway that kind of stood up. I know from speaking to Paddy, he was kind of a little bit disappointed, maybe perhaps his team stood back a little bit, but Galway grabbed, they answered, they rallied, grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck really, the goal, a couple of late, huge, not just points, but like long range points that kind of were kind of real kind of stabs in the back in terms of the momentum that they created. Yeah,
and look, they took off Carrie Dolan. They had Ailish O'Reilly on the freeze late on. Big brave call to take off your free taker who'd been doing very well. Ailish O'Reilly stepped up, put a free over the bar from, you know, the 45 out on the sideline. Very, very difficult score. That was very important. Niamh Kilkenny got an outrageous score, very, very important score. She went left, she went right, she went back, she went forward, she went up, she went down. She eventually found the space to get the ball over the bar. Those ended up being crucial scores. Cork, by comparison, didn't have enough players wanting to get on the ball, I felt. And they made some mistakes. You know, we saw that Cork were getting change when they were kind of delivering direct ball. And you had a couple of great breaks from Amy O'Connor, Katrina Mackey. If it was me and I was the half-back, the likes of Laura Hayes, I wouldn't have been trying to go for my own score late on. I'd have been giving a direct ball into the girls. And because the game was so close, trying to win the free to bring it back and bring it back and bring it back.
To a certain extent, you don't want to cross sports and compare sports, but there's a small element of maybe the Tyrone versus Kerry semi-final in the fact that a bit of streetwise, don't be taken into contact. They felt like there was opportunities. The few times Cork did kind of spread it, go direct and wide. Again, these are for not any consolation to you or anyone else from Cork right now, but they're, I suppose, the next stepping stones really in trying to get that performance levels increased.
Yeah, and I wonder, were Cork too focused on goals? Because the Antrim game previous to that, Maeve Kelly, the player of the match in that game, she got some great scores because she went into space and she took her chances from 40, 50 yards. Cork are capable of doing that, but they weren't looking to get into those spaces today. They were looking to go a very direct route. And when you say Sarah Dervin standing on at full back, you're not going to get in there easily. So I think there was a bit of naivety there. There was space. And if you think back to last year's All-Ireland final when Denise Gall was so prevalent for Kilkenny, where was she getting her scores? In that lovely space, out in the wing. Cork didn't do that today.
Yeah, because it's like, again, I'm getting flashbacks to the first half. After a promising opening, say, quarter from Galway, it was Cork that kind of ground into the game, but it was kind of long-range points from there as well. I think at one stage, all their scores from play, but they were all kind of from distance as well. Just didn't do enough of that as the game went on. Exactly.
So I feel that if they had stuck to that process and sprayed the ball around the field, they would have got more change. But it just felt to me that they weren't looking for Chloe Sigerson, they weren't looking for Hannah Looney. Aisling Thompson they needed to drive, I suppose, they needed to drive forward a little more, but they did need to bring out the kind of expanse of the game. They were playing it too narrow, too direct.
And ultimately, I suppose it fell into Galway's hands. But at the same time, the character levels that they shown once that goal went on and some to them, that's probably a lot of experience as well that you've touched on there as well. Certainly helps.
And look, we'll talk about a bit of cynicism there later on.
I was wondering how long it would take you to get this in.
Look, it's exactly what I do. You know, Aoife Donoghue went down around 56 minutes. Galway were up by 2. I think they brought on 3 substitutes: Rebecca Henley, Noreen Cohen, Anne-Marie Starr. Just that bit of cuteness to run down the clock. Cork start to panic. Then they're actually forcing it. They're not actually getting clean ball into the forwards. Then you just start running down the clock as Galway. And that's probably the difference between the two teams. Cork were just a little naive today. When they went on top, they should have been able to set up and organise themselves so that they didn't allow Galway to win possession, and they did the exact opposite.
I suppose today we saw Galway kind of learn their lessons from last year and push on. You open for something similar from Cork, definitely with your red tinted glasses.
Well, look, I'm disappointed to say that Hannah Looney, you know, is going to be away next year. Linda Collins is heading away next year. These are players that will be hard replaced. We didn't have a bench today. That was evident. We brought on, I think, Cliona Healy, and we brought on Linda Collins. But I remember of old, we had 5 players to bring on to Cork teams when we were winning. And I think that's what Cork will have to do. They will actually have to give their players who are coming into the team more game time, more championship time. We don't see that through the championship. Paddy is notorious for not using subs. He's always played with 16 or 17 players, and unfortunately today that proved the difference, because I just felt that bit of experience when Rebecca Henley came in, Noreen Cohen, Anne-Marie Starr. You can't buy that.
I think the only last thing to do is maybe see if there's any ice, because it was getting a bit intense there at times as the game was going on in the press box here.
Well, I'm going to check your arm as well, because I think you have a couple of bruises. I tend to mark the reporter like a full back. So, look, I suppose I really enjoyed the game today because I thought it was a spectacle. After last Sunday, after Meath, I was going, how is the Camogie going to live up to that ferociousness that both teams showed last week? I think they did. It's a different game, right? But it is a brilliant game, and 2 teams went out there today and left everything on the field. I'm not disappointed in Cork. I'm disappointed for Cork because they did so many things right. They just did a couple of things wrong, and that proved the difference.
Well, I think we're about to get kicked out of Croke Park here as well. We're the last one standing. Galway ultimately have done enough here full time at Croke Park.
Sarah Dervin, she's going to get married in November. They're going to have right crack at that wedding in November. Captain fantastic today.